Folks, welcome back in. Good to have you with us as we begin the program this morning. Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner, who's off today and deserved that second day off, frankly. He's been working really hard, as you all know, and does a great job here and brings you what needs to be brought that doesn't get brought by many of the mainstream media. And here we have a very interesting dynamic taking place, folks. And you don't have to be a football fan to be concerned about this story. Michael Sam played great football at the college level, though many would argue, analysts, people who are in executive positions in the National Football League would say that they're not convinced he would make it in the National Football League. And so the big controversy came up because now Michael Sam has been drafted 249th out of 256 drafted players in the NFL draft by the St. Louis Rams. And frankly, they have some great defensive linemen and linebackers, and he may not make the team, but they drafted him. So the question now is, was he drafted by that team as a favor to the league because he happens to be gay? Now, I hope he does well in the National Football League. I really don't care about his sexual orientation. It shouldn't even be an issue. But he has been protected and nurtured and cherished, not because of his talent as a football player, but because of the reality that he's gay. And so all of a sudden, the world is swirling around him. And there is now punishment for those who would question his being where he is. Example, Don Jones of the Miami Dolphins on Sunday tweeted, and of course players get themselves in trouble when they tweet, we all know that, on Twitter. He was critical of Michael Sam and had to apologize publicly. And he used the phrase OMG, oh my God, and horrible when he tweeted. OMG and horrible. OMG, of course, oh my God. Well, ladies and gentlemen, what is so outlandish about that when you think about the fact that all three major religions, and perhaps others, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, have problems with homosexuality? And I'm not here to suggest that he should be treated differently because of that as a football player. Look, one thing about sports, what happens on the field is where you're going to make it or break it. Jackie Robinson broke the color line in baseball because he was a terrific baseball player and had the ability to withstand the verbal abuse that he took. And that was the key, that he was a great baseball player. Michael Sam is breaking ground here because he's the first publicly stated gay football player trying to make it in the National Football League, and he's been drafted into the National Football League. Now, if somebody happens to be of a different faith, somebody has to be Christian, and they have problems, they're uncomfortable about the fact that somebody is out there publicly talking about their being gay and then coming into the NFL, that person might say, well, you know what, my son looks at these guys as heroes. And if this guy wants to live his private life as a homosexual, that's his business. I'm not going to interfere with his private life. If he's with another adult, living without abuse or any of the other issues that come up in any relationship, but lives a voluntary, consensual relationship with another person of the same sex, that's their business. But it ought to be private. I mean, we don't have people coming out and talking about being straight. It doesn't happen. So why come out and talk about your sexual orientation no matter what it is? So now you've got a family, let's say they're raising their children with religious values, whether it's Judaism or Christianity or Islam, and part of those values is that homosexuality is inappropriate. In fact, in those, if one wants to follow religions to the extreme, it's a sin. And now you have those people feeling as though they are unable to comment or bring out their points of view because there's somehow going to be a condemnation by the politically correct crowd to hammer them, to cause them to feel uncomfortable, simply because they're following their religious beliefs. Here's a football player, Don Jones, and I don't know why he said it. Could be from his own religious beliefs, maybe not. But he says that he tweeted that it's horrible, and OMG, oh my God. And why did he say that? Because Michael Sam, on camera, during the draft of the NFL, which is a major event, huge numbers of people watch it, including kids, when he was chosen by the St. Louis Rams, 249th out of the 256 that are picked, he gave his male partner an embracing kiss that was, shall we say, a love kiss with a partner, the same as it would be with a man and a woman. Now, here you have kids watching this who might be of a Christian background, who might be of a Jewish background of Orthodox belief, who might be of an Islamic background where they, in fact, will talk about homosexuality being punished by death, which of course is absurd. But when those religions take that position, and then the people who follow those religions cannot express their point of view, this guy Don Jones simply said that it was horrible, and he's, oh my God, when Michael Sam kissed his male lover on television. Now, is that okay with you folks? If your son or daughter is sitting there watching this, or for that matter, you yourself, do you want to see a football player kissing his male lover on national television? Would be the point. So now, Don Jones has to issue this apology. He says, and it was, of course, issued through the team, so they pressured him to issue it. He says, Miami Dolphins. He said, I want to apologize to Michael Sam for the inappropriate comments that I made last night on social media. I take full responsibility for them, and I regret that these tweets took away from his draft moment. End quote. So he got pounded for that. Now ask yourself this question, folks. What happened when Tim Tebow was being drafted or not drafted, as the case may be? The NFL didn't really want him as quarterback. He, of course, did finally make it. And with the Denver Broncos, got them to the playoffs, actually. Didn't play real well, but got them to the playoffs. And they won some playoff games with Tebow at quarterback. But how many times did he get pounded and pummeled by guys like Letterman and Bill Maher because he was Christian? And that after he would throw a touchdown pass or score a touchdown running, you'd see him on the sidelines getting down on his knee, saying a little prayer out of his religious belief, as if there was some anomaly to that. Tim Tebow was treated with jokes left, right, and sideways because and as part of his Christian faith. And yet Michael Sam gets treated with this protection, as if he's in a protective bubble. Oh, don't say anything about him. And if your religion says that homosexuality is wrong, don't you dare say it publicly. It's unacceptable and it's outlandish. And that's my problem with it. Not that Michael Sam is homosexual, but the fact that it's a double standard. If you're politically correct and you're doing what the politically correct crowd wants you to do, that's fine. But if you're living in a Christian life, or in a Jewish religious life, or the precepts in Islam about this subject of homosexuality, all of a sudden, you become the bad guy. If you say anything about that publicly, oh, you're a homophobe for saying that. And then if you say something publicly, if you're a football player, and I'm not sure it was really that horrible when Don Jones says it was horrible and oh my God. That's his opinion regarding the two men kissing on camera. My question to you, was their kissing on camera appropriate for families watching the NFL draft, especially the kids? And is there a double standard in the way Tim Tebow was treated and in the way Michael Sam is being treated as a homosexual in Sam's case, as a Christian in Tim Tebow's case? Number to Boston is 617-266-6868. 617-266-6868. I thought this was an irony of how we protect certain minority groups, and yet the dominant religion in this country gets scurrilously treated when it comes to a guy like Tim Tebow and his beliefs that somehow many people do not like and say so, but guess what? They don't get pummeled for it, do they? Good to have you with us. That double standard exists in this country, reflected in this case. Glad to talk to you about it, too, here at Boston's talk station, WRKO. Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner. And good to have you with us. We'll get this conversation going. Have your cup of coffee. Join us. Get on the lines. Again, the number is 617-266-6868. It is 6:16 at Boston's talk station, WRKO.
Well, my reaction to the kiss itself is that it didn't bother me. The fact is that Michael Sam came out, acknowledged that he was a gay man in February, and so something like that we see with heterosexual couples all the time. And if that's how he chose to express himself, so be it. However, I do think it needs to be said a couple of things. Number one, I didn't see, and I still haven't seen, people were elaborating with the cake on the face and all of this other stuff that was going on. If I saw all of that based on what was described to me, because again, I haven't seen it, I would say the same thing that I would say to a heterosexual couple.
Stephen A. Smith from ESPN. I go back to my point. Why would that be appropriate if the vast majority of Americans are uncomfortable with that kind of scene of two men kissing in a love embrace on camera, and kids watch that because they're fans of the National Football League in huge numbers, then shouldn't they save that simply because it's not the mainstream? Not that they shouldn't do it. They want to go to a hotel room and have a private kiss or whatever else. That's their business. But publicly, maybe they could have a little bit more advisability to avoid that sort of thing. And imposing that on children watching this who believe that a relationship is between a man and a woman. Not to deny these two men the right to be together, but not to impose it on others. And that's part of the big problem. Well, remember Janet Jackson? And she showed too much of herself on camera? And everybody got all bent out of shape. Well, what's different about this? Maybe they showed too much of their private relationship on camera. Two men kissing. I hope Michael Sam does well as a football player, but frankly, let him enjoy his private life and keep it private. And the Tim Tebow comparison certainly is appropriate. Tim Tebow was treated with far more joking and humiliation, and Michael Sam is being protected. Tim Tebow being a Christian, Michael Sam being a homosexual. Jeff, you're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO. Good morning.
Thanks, Jeff. Well, it just goes down to, I guess, cowardice or laziness. The white male Christian is always going to be the easier one to pick on because they know Tim Tebow's not going to come back with an insult, a dig, a jab, make fun of someone's family, make fun of someone's religion. He's always going to be accepting and, like Jesus taught, turn the other cheek. So the white male Christian is always going to be the easiest to pick on because everybody else, I guess, in one way or another, even if they call them Christians, like David Letterman is probably a Christian, but he probably doesn't practice, he's probably not serious, and they're cowards because they know they're not going to get picked on.
Well, but you see, let me ask you about this. What about the kids who are watching? I mean, if you come from a religious family, or not even necessarily excessively religious, just the fact that you believe in a traditional household, a husband and a wife and kids, right, and these people are living a different lifestyle, which they're entitled to. Yes. But wouldn't it be appropriate to keep that private and discreet rather than imposing it on everybody else?
Of course it would, but in this day and age, it's what you're supposed to do. It's all about liberal freedom, expression. But their expression is our, the people who don't think that's appropriate. We're the bad people. They should be able to do what they want because in some way or another, they're lazy. They don't want to go by a certain set of morals or whatever. Like what you said, behind closed doors is fine. Who cares? I don't want to get in anybody's bedroom. But even if it was a heterosexual couple, I wouldn't want to see them making out at the NFL draft with my 9-year-old next to me.
That's my point, and I appreciate it, and I thank you. You know, and I'm going to get right to the next call, but let me just say, Christian Science Monitor did a story about this, and they asked these questions. They said different sorts of questions have emerged. Why did it take so long for Michael Sam to get drafted? Then, given that most seventh-round draft picks are largely throwaways, did the Rams draft Sam simply to save face for the league? Then they say, did 31 other teams want to avoid the image that came after Sam was finally drafted when he kissed his boyfriend on live television? I mean, in other words, it's as if they should feel guilty for not buying into this idea that it's okay to go public with this personal relationship. Sly is next, and I think it should be personal, not public. Sly, you're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO. Good morning.
Hey, Mike. I actually talked to Jeff Kuhner about this a couple of months ago, and I made a comment, and we just kind of laughed it off, but I was actually serious. We're supposed to accept homosexuality because these people, I guess they're born like this. It's not, something that they chose. So if they were born like this, it has to be totally normal and totally accepting. We have to be accepting of it. Well, on the other hand, I can't help who I am. I can't help the way I feel. When I see two guys kissing, it grosses me out. And I was born that way, dude. I'm not faking it. I'm not doing it on purpose. We live in a society where 96% of the people are not homosexual. 96% of the people are heterosexual, and we have a small 3.5 to 4% that are homosexual. And some of us, me personally, I wouldn't kiss another man any more than I would lick an ashtray. I just think it's gross, and I can't help it. So that guy, you said a couple of minutes ago, you said that, the guy's gay, that's fine, but maybe he shouldn't have done that in public. I don't necessarily agree with that. If he wants to kiss on TV, if he wants to kiss his boyfriend in public, he's got every right to do that. He doesn't have to do it behind closed doors because we say so, but we also have the right to be grossed out about it, and he's just going to have to live with it.
But here's my point. The reason I brought it up, Sly, is because Don Jones of the Miami Dolphins tweeted and said two things. Number one, the word horrible, and number two was OMG, oh my God. In other words, he didn't like, and it was about the kiss on television. Doesn't he have, if they have the right to kiss publicly, doesn't he have the right to respond publicly?
110%. Absolutely. That's what I'm saying. I'm not going to tell Michael Sam that he has to keep his homosexuality behind closed doors, and I'm certainly not going to tell Don Jones that he has to keep his comments behind closed doors. I don't believe we have the right to tell either one of them how they can naturally react to anything.
But let me ask you this. Look, Sly, let me ask you something. Janet Jackson comes on camera, totally bearing herself, all of that. We remember from during the halftime at the Super Bowl, she performed, and it became a big deal. The FCC almost wanted to, or at least talked about, fining CBS because of they're showing this on camera. It became a huge deal, and they changed the halftime show at the Super Bowl because of it. Now, that was offensive to kids. That was the whole point. Now, don't you think that showing on camera two men kissing in a love relationship might be offensive to kids as well?
I think so. You think so. But there's a whole lot of people that are going to say, no way. They're pushing this gay agenda. There's a new TV show on MTV, and the whole premise of the show is these two girls are in a school, in high school, and they're very unpopular and stuff. So what they do is they pretend to be gay, and they pretend to be lesbian girlfriends, and then all of a sudden they get all this popularity. I don't know if you've heard of this. It's a new show on MTV. They're pushing this gay agenda. So even though I think it's, not very pleasant to look at that, and I don't think it's, very good for kids to see that, I think that, and you think that, but a lot of people on the left are going to say that we don't have the right to say that. Nudity is one thing, but they're going to say that, this guy's just expressing his love. Well,
I understand your point, and I think other people have to respond how they feel as well. I thank you for calling too, Sly. It's good to talk to you. Jamie, you're on WRKO with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner. Good morning.
Good morning, Mike. Thank you for sitting in for Jeff. Yeah, I want to just make an observation about all this that I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way, is that, what happened to, the First Amendment, your right to, your freedom of speech and your freedom of religion. And I think that this, kind of oppresses that for people because, look what happened to Don Sterling. What do you expect from, this coach of the Miami Dolphins? He has seen what happened to somebody like Don Sterling who made a comment that was private. And that was, put out there. Now it's, apples and oranges. It's, homosexuality versus, potentially racist comment. But the fact of the matter is that, nobody can have their freedom of speech anymore, even if it is because of their religious rights.
But here's my point. And my point to you, Jamie, is that if you're part of the politically correct crowd and you want to protect a politically correct concept, that's okay. But if you happen to be, let's say, and I'm not Christian, but if you happen to be Christian, you cannot express yourself in your Christian beliefs if they disagree with the politically correct crowd. And I thought there was free speech and freedom of religion in this country. That's what I thought.
Exactly, and I agree with you 100%. That's my problem, is that doesn't exist anymore. Your freedom of speech and freedom of religion are overshadowed by this new gay agenda, and they get all the rights while you get nothing.
I appreciate the call, and it's a great point. Thank you, sir. Our number to Boston is 617-266-6868. One of my fundamental questions here is the contrast between the way Tim Tebow was treated and the way Michael Sam is being treated. Tebow, being a Christian, was pounded, made fun of. He was the butt of jokes, and Michael Sam is being protected and nurtured, which is fine. But why impose it on the public? And do you think your kids need to watch at the football draft two men kissing in an embrace after Sam gets drafted by the St. Louis Rams? Should that be part of that program? Good to have you with us. 631 at Boston's talk station, WRKO. Folks, welcome back in. Good to be here. 6:35 it is. Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at Boston's talk station, WRKO. Our number to Boston is 617-266-6868. A couple of items on the Michael Sam drafting by the St. Louis Rams. Number one, is it appropriate for him to be kissing his male lover on camera where kids are watching, where families are watching, and they may have values based on Judaism, Christianity, or Islam where homosexuality is wrong? I guess those religions don't count in terms of imposing this on people. And Don Jones of the Miami Dolphins tweets, OMG, meaning oh my God that they did that, and horrible was the way he described it. He got fined and suspended for doing that. He got punished. Even though and I don't know this, but if he were a Christian who believed homosexuality is wrong, says that as part of his belief and then gets punished for it. And then Tim Tebow, a Christian who was the butt of jokes for David Letterman, Bill Maher, go right down the list of the jokes that were made about Tebow, who happened to be a Christian, and people didn't want to protect that. And so we get into those issues about whether we are to be imposed with the alternative lifestyle as somehow having to be shoved down people's throats and accepted. And if you don't accept it, you live with discomfort, even though you might be in the majority. I'm not saying people should be discriminated against. I'm saying go live your private life privately. Okay, let's go to Robert first of all. Robert, you're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO. Good morning.
Mike, good morning. How you doing, buddy?
Good.
Hey, listen, here's the bottom line. I don't care what this guy does. He's not going to make the NFL anyway. They're going to cut him. He's an okay player. He's not even a good football player.
No, that's true. He's halfway between. He's not really a linebacker. He's not really a good lineman. He's not big enough, so,
he's got a chase back. What's going to happen when he gets hit by a guy 6'6"? He's going to be like Pancake. He's going to be awful. Then they'll say you have to put a special uniform on him because they don't want to hit him too hard.
Yeah, but then if he gets cut, if the Rams cut him, and then are they going to be charged with the discrimination?
Of course. They're going to do everything to keep this thing alive. Hey, listen, here's what we're going to do. Since the liberals, what you're going to do with liberals is take their hands away and take their mouth away. So I would say the following: hey, folks, stop watching local TV stations and boycott all the businesses that advertise on them. That's how you shut them down. Thank you very much.
Robert, thank you for calling. Good to talk to you, too. As we go to Eric next. Eric, you're on WRKO with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner. Good morning.
Okay, is it so inappropriate when somebody else who gets drafted in there is very excited and happy and kisses their girlfriend or their wife? I mean, what is the big deal here? The guy happens to be gay. The guy is happy and excited he got drafted. and he wanted to share it with someone who was very important to him. What is the big deal here? There's nothing anti-religious about it. There's nothing horrible. The guy is gay. The guy was excited he got drafted, and he kissed somebody who was important to him. What is the big deal?
The big deal is that it's not about Michael Sam per se. It's about the fact that the people who are the consumers of football, of watching on television, who are the people that the NFL depends on, have kids. And I'll say the same thing I said about the Janet Jackson story. What was the big deal about her baring her chest or whatever? The fact is that this is something that violates the religious beliefs of millions of people across this country. Is it not?
So what was ESPN even taking a picture of it for if that was going to be such a big deal? It wasn't anything he planned. He just had the reaction that any normal person would have in a situation where they had something that they've been working for their entire life, and one of the biggest dreams of their life came true. They're going to be happy. They're going to kiss somebody that's important to them. In this case, this guy happens to be another guy. Well, then the problem. You're going to be on the wrong side of history on this thing. So no matter what. So I mean, there's
no wrong side of history. If a religion, I'm making a point here, sir. It's not even about it's not about me. It's not about you. It's about the fact that if people have religious beliefs who find that act to be offensive, then it's not about Michael Sam doing the kissing. It's about the networks covering it and showing it on camera for kids who are raised to believe that that's not to be the case. And all of a sudden, here they are imposed with that. I appreciate the point, and I thank you, but that's clearly and obviously the reality is that people who are offended by it, the vast majority of people, have to be imposed with that. That's all. Winston, you're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. I think that somehow we have bought into the narrative of the homosexuals. And if we understand quite clearly exactly what these people do, it's not just a matter of loving one another, but it's what they do in private and how nasty that is, then of course I guess that we will all reject that narrative. Thank you so much. God bless. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Look, what they do privately, I'm not going to judge them. That's their business. I'm just saying that publicly, to me, I don't have children, but I can't imagine if I raised my kids as religious Jews or religious Christians, or for that matter, religious Islamic children, where it's also condemned as a sin to be homosexual. I think to be imposed with that by a society that's just flagrantly pushing aside the views of all these people is wrong. We go to William next. William, you're on with Mike Siegel at Boston's talk station WRKO, in for Jeff Kuhner. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Mike. How are you? That last caller, he's on the wrong side of history, because I'm going to tell you something. There's a cleansing coming. I see it in everyone who I talk to. We're tired of the homosexual gender thrown in our face. It's abnormal. It's anti-moralistic, and that's what they don't understand. We've had enough. We've accepted them for years. It never bothers at all. But then they start taking our churches to court. They start trying to pump up these diversity agendas into school. We're tired of it. We're tired of it. And they're going to come to find out that things are going to change in this country. They're going to be on the wrong side of history, and that's all I got to say. Thank you.
I thank you for calling, sir. Good to talk to you. Look, to me, it's about protecting their right of privacy, they being anybody who wants to have an adult sexual relationship with another person of either sex. That's their business. But don't put it out here for public display. Let that be your private business. Ronnie, you're on with Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO. Good morning to you.
Hey, good morning, Mike. I think your previous caller, Eric, is completely missing the point. Notice how, if it's a gay man, it's perfectly normal to share great news that you just got with someone you love. Well, isn't that all Tim Tebow did? Wasn't he just always sharing his good fortune with God publicly? I mean, I'm just using Eric's argument. That's all Tim Tebow ever did. He wasn't shoving anything down someone's throat.
And boy, did he get nailed for that, didn't he?
Right. I mean, he was completely blasphemed, and what we were told was that doesn't have a place on the football field. That doesn't have a place in the locker room. And yet the exact same argument is completely okay for a gay couple, and that's what Eric doesn't understand. That's the hypocrisy that has people so infuriated. That's all Tim Tebow is doing too, is sharing how he feels with somebody that he loves, God. So what's the big deal, Eric?
Do you have kids?
No, I do not.
If you had children, a 12-year-old son who idolized the NFL players, now you see, and you go to church every Sunday, and you believe you try to raise your child with religious beliefs, and then they see that kiss of the two men on television. Should that be there for that kid to see?
Oh, Mike, I wouldn't even know where to begin. Like, my first thought would be, oh, great. Now I got to spend the rest of my day explaining this to my kid. That would be my first thought. You know, I just don't understand, you know, why people just can't be who they are. You know, why people just can't be reasonable and good. You know, like I said, his kid, I think it's gross myself, like Sly said earlier. If you're born that way and you're gay, you know, I totally accept that. That's the way the world is. But, you know, I was born that when I see that, I don't think anything nice, Mike, you know, and that doesn't make me a hater or an anti-gay zealot or a homophobic person. It just makes me who I am. It grosses me out, you know, and I sure as hell would not want to have to explain that to my kid when we're just watching a football draft. That's all. You know, we don't want to be beat over the head with political messaging or gay messaging. We just want to watch a football draft. Is that too much?
I appreciate the question. I thank you for the call. People should think about that. Let's go to Steve next. Let's go to Tom first. Tom, you're on WRKO with Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner. Good morning to you.
Hey, Mike. Good morning to you. Thank you very much for taking my call. Love the show. I have a tough question for you.
Yeah.
Let's just paint a different scenario. Let's say a group of Muslim businessmen who believe very much in Sharia law own an NFL football team.
Right.
And they spoke out publicly about how they felt about homosexuality under Sharia law. Do you think they would come under heavy condemnation publicly?
No, not in this country.
Now, that's quite a double standard, isn't it?
Well, I think you were leading me to that point, which is that, look, Arianna Huffington said the other day, Bill Maher actually made a comment that we need to call it what it is. It's Islamic fundamentalism. I was surprised at Maher taking that position. He's tired of liberals pretending that it's not Islamic fundamentalism that's the problem. And Arianna Huffington said, well, we can't call it one religion or all people in that religion. Trying to excuse it. So the bottom line is, there's somehow an excuse in this country for Islamic fundamentalism, and so they probably would get a pass on that, yes.
I think people are getting tired of the hypocrisy, don't you?
I think so, but we need to stand up and be counted. Look, Michael Sam has every right. God bless him. He can be in a loving relationship with a man. I have no problem. It's none of my business, really. But it is my business if people, tens of millions of Americans, have different views about that act and then have to be imposed with it on television, or Tim Tebow, because he's Christian, gets pounded, and that's okay by the media. That doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I hear you, brother.
Appreciate it, sir. Thank you. Let's try, let's see. We'll go to Artie is next. Artie, you're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO. Good morning.
Hey, great talking to you, Mike. Hey, I just got a few things. You know, people don't realize I'd rather live in a nice Jewish neighborhood with practicing Jewish people and Christians than a bunch of people committing sodomy. And one other thing, it's unnatural what they do. It spreads diseases, and it promotes child molesting. And the further they people sign up, the better off the country will be. Thank you.
I thank you. And you don't even have to go that far. It's just simply the point that if major religions that are supposed to have First Amendment protection can't publicly say anything about this, then we're not protecting the rights of those people to do so. And when Don Jones, I'll say it one more time, Don Jones of the Miami Dolphins comes out Sunday night and he tweets about Michael Sam kissing his boyfriend on camera after he got drafted, the guy says, Don Jones says, OMG, meaning oh my God, about the kiss, and horrible. Now, he's not condemning the relationship between these two men. He's condemning on television having to see that. And yet he has to turn around and issue this out-and-out apology that the Miami Dolphins pressured him to issue. And then Joe Philbin, the coach, says, we were disappointed to read Don's tweets during the NFL draft. They were inappropriate and unacceptable, and we regret the negative impact these comments had on such an important weekend for the NFL. Well, I'd ask Coach Philbin, is it perhaps inappropriate for two men to be kissing in a love circumstance on television when young kids who might be raised as Christians or Jews or Islamic for that matter, any one of those religions that finds male-to-male sexual relationships or love relationships to be unacceptable or a sin? Is it okay for that to happen, Coach Philbin? Shame on you. Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner at 617-266-6868, the number to Boston, at Boston's talk station, WRKO. Your calls are next. Stay with us.
If I saw all of that based on what was described to me, because again, I haven't seen it, I would say the same thing that I would say to a heterosexual couple. Get a room.
That's Stephen A. Smith. And if you heard what he had to say about the response to the kiss between Michael Sam and his male lover after he got drafted by the St. Louis Rams, get a room. Not on television. Good point, Stephen. I thank you. Let's go to your calls. And you're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO. Good morning.
Good morning, Mike. Now, I honestly believe that if people think this was just a spontaneous expression of love and happiness, they're very mistaken. There is a belief on the part of gay activists that the way to get the rest of us to fully accept their behavior is to keep pushing images like this in front of people, and our reactions are normal, heartfelt reactions are things we should be ashamed of. So this is a way to really push the culture war. And I really think sometimes hearing the news about this kid, that he's being coached to be a sort of someone to put his foot out there and be the first. I don't think there's anything random about it whatsoever.
I think it's a great point. I thank you, Ann. And there is this agenda. It's live and let live. You want to do what you want to do privately as consenting adults? Go to it. Leave us alone. How's that? We go next to Jimmy. Jimmy, you're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO. Good morning.
Good morning, Mike. This has been for a long time brewing. It's become like a political movement, an agenda. And the previous caller was right. And that guy is saying as far as you're on the wrong side of history, well, about 1000 BC, this is nothing new, and it developed in the problems of educating young boys where, eventually society had to get a grip on it. And the thing is, even David Bordner, my hero, said, he was a homosexual. He said, it's an abnormality. He says, I was born that way, can't change it, people shouldn't be punished for it. I worried about young kids, like preteen, teen, the struggle they must go through. But I'm tired of it being where people actually get punished for having an opinion. You know what I mean? It's so crazy. But I say to liberals all the time, I says, well, there's been, a lot of research done, the difference in brains and, anatomy of biotechnology. It said someday it'll be detectable, and if people exercise their choice in 100 years, there won't be any.
Well,
they go berserk,
I think,
what I mean?
David Brodnow was a class act all the way, and I thank you for calling, and may he rest in peace. He was an icon of Boston and handled all of his life with dignity and grace. Michael, you're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO. We got about 1 minute. Go ahead.
Mike, thanks for taking my call. This is all just textbook Obama/Obama manual. Don't let a good crisis go to waste. Let's pay attention to anything except for the scandals that are going on with this administration. Let's don't pay attention to the fact that Obama has shut down the conservative opinion and ability to get into the government to change and represent people out here that are actually in the majority. And these guys are just trying to, smoke screen and ignore and trivialize everything that's, crucial to the fact that Americans are not happy with the criminalistic environment that this administration is putting out.
Thank you for calling, and I'm going to come back with a new breaking scandal having to do with Timothy Geithner, Secretary of the Treasury under Barack Obama. His new book is Tell All. We'll get to that when we come back. Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner at Boston's talk station, WRKO. It is 7:06, folks. Good morning to you. Welcome in. Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner today. Jeff's off. A well-deserved day off, by the way. And we're back at it. I said before the break to a fellow who had called and complained about this administration's activity, unethical, maybe criminal. New story coming out. It just broke this morning. It is a story about the former Secretary of the Treasury, Timothy Geithner. He's the guy who had tax problems with the IRS, and he was named Secretary of the Treasury anyway. Remember him? Didn't matter to this administration that he had those problems, I guess. He's coming out with a book. Timothy Geithner said that the White House intentionally wanted him to mislead the American people on issues. Says so in his book. No question about it that Geithner was placed in the position that he didn't want to be, which was to mislead the American people. On what? For one, on Social Security. Secretary of the Treasury Timothy Geithner was told to lie about Social Security. That in fact, he was supposed to say to the public that it did not contribute to the deficit and that it was therefore going to be protected. And he points out that this was basically code language for the people on the left, the base of Barack Obama, that we intend to protect Social Security. That's the code language, that it did not contribute to the deficit. And so Geithner says, I was asked to lie. And I'm not interested in lying. It's not in my nature to do that. He felt very uncomfortable about it. Then, during the time when there were bankers going home with big parachutes of money after the collapse of the banking industry and all of the federal money that went to Bank of America and to Citibank and to many of the other major banks, Timothy Geithner was told, we want you to express outrage at these bankers publicly. And Geithner said, listen, I'm not the type that expresses outrage. I might present a point of view, but I don't express outrage. In other words, the Secretary of the Treasury was not really there to carry out policy that he believed in a thoughtful, meaningful way. He was there to carry out the political agenda of one Barack Obama. Now, I realize when a president appoints a cabinet member, and then that cabinet member gets approved by the Senate through advice and consent to be that cabinet member in that position, that presumably that person is going to carry out the policies that are consistent with that administration. It makes sense. Can't expect Barack Obama to hire a conservative Secretary of the Treasury who would have common sense about trying to balance budgets and not increase the national debt ceiling and spend only what we take in and all of that, because he believes in big government, Obama. Spend all we can spend. But when you start telling your cabinet member that you're supposed to go out there and fundamentally, without even apologizing or compromising the language, lie to the American people. Tell them that Social Security is not, in fact, contributing to the deficit. Even though Geithner might not have agreed with that, he was told to do that. Now, we were supposed to have had a transparent presidency with this administration. Do you remember? Barack Obama said when he took office, this will be the most transparent presidency in history. It's been the most secretive in history, folks. And it's been the most disingenuous and lying administration, perhaps in history. Maybe with the exception of Bill Clinton, I'm not sure, but certainly this administration has misled people left, right, and sideways. On the left and the right. And if I were on the left, which I'm not, I'd be indignant. It's one thing to have a point of view. It's another thing to have people intimidated and bullied into lying for you when they don't want to do it. And when you treat the American public with such disdain as to tell them something that you know is a lie, only to get political voting out of it. Now, look, we talked yesterday about the fact that the Secretary of Defense said he was in a room with Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama when Hillary was Secretary of State, and he was stunned by the fact that the two of them dealt with the Benghazi issue as a political issue. They didn't want it to appear that there was a terrorist attack. They didn't want to respond to a terrorist attack to make it look like we were under fire, under siege. They wanted to just let it go and go away. And they perfectly were comfortable letting those lives be lost in the midst of that. For political reasons. That's what's outrageous about it. They put the political consequences above the responsibility as Commander-in-Chief and Secretary of State. And allowed those lives to be lost when perhaps they could have been saved. And now we hear, just this morning this came out, that Geithner's new book is going to say they wanted me to lie. Now here you have people who are cabinet members. Bob Gates, Secretary of Defense, and Timothy Geithner, Secretary of the Treasury, both saying how they have exposed this administration for its fraud on the American people. Fraud in Benghazi, fraud in the Treasury Department, on Social Security, and supposed to express this outrage at the bankers so that it looks good for the administration to pound the bankers. Again, another code for the far left. How far are we going to go with this? How long are we supposed to put up with this? When does it end? When do the Democrats finally throw up their hands and say, we got a problem in the White House? When does Harry Reid finally get off his hands and knees to Obama and stand up with any sense of integrity and call this president out? And then, of course, because of all of this and because of what Obama did with Obamacare, changing it about 22 times without Congress approving it, violation of law. You can't just change a law on your own as president. Congress has to change a law that they passed. Now John Boehner comes out and says he wants Jeb Bush to run for president. And at the same time, Boehner says, I'm going to take up immigration reform in small pieces. Well, let's think about that. Boehner says we have to first trust the president before we take up immigration reform. I'll ask you folks the question. Do any of you trust this administration to do anything? To tell the truth? Let's start with that. Do you trust Barack Obama to tell the truth? Should John Boehner trust Barack Obama on immigration reform? That he'll carry out the law? Because you see what's going to happen, even if they pass a law that says we're going to have security at the border, and we're going to put up a fence, we're going to have troops there, whatever it might be, drones, technology, cameras, all of that. You think Obama will enforce it? He doesn't enforce the laws he doesn't want to enforce. He didn't enforce the Defense of Marriage Act, did he? Eric Holder said, I'm not going to enforce it. I don't like the law, I won't enforce it, even though it's the obligation of the administration to enforce all the laws in this country. And they won't do it if they don't like the law. So why is Boehner even talking about bringing up immigration reform this year? Who in their right mind is going to trust Barack Obama to carry out any law? And now Geithner says, I was told to lie? Point blank. Bob Gates says they talked about the political consequences of Benghazi instead of dealing with the issue? As Secretary of Defense, when does it end? Our number to Boston is 617-266-6868. Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner. Let's start with Russ. Russ, you're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner. Good morning to you.
Mike, to trust the president and the leadership of the Democratic Party, I'm sorry to say this, but you have to be an ignorant fool.
Well, listen, it's true. You're right. You're right. I appreciate it. Paul, you're on WRKO with Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner. Good morning.
Good morning, Michael. When it comes to this guy, Obama, he gets an F. He's a failure as a president. Anybody who's voted for him, and we have people who have voted for him twice. And I'm not saying Romney was the answer. I'm not saying McCain was the answer. But I'm going to hold people accountable. Because if you go back in the history of this country here, when it comes to lies, we get Bush with weapons of mass destruction. We get Lyndon Johnson lying about the number of people dying in Vietnam. So this has become a common practice. The days of Eisenhower and Truman, one Republican, one Democrat, both of them served in the military and having some sense of virtue and character. These other clowns who become presidents, Obama would have never became president if his mother didn't have sex with a guy from Kenya. Bush would have never become president if his father wasn't president. These guys have not accomplished things to get to the position where they are. And then when they get there, they're over their head. They can't make great moral decisions that are going to help the country. All they want to do is preserve their image. And let's face it, any normal person who's staying in touch, which most people aren't, realize that this guy here, you can't take him with anything he says.
Well, that's my point, this whole thing with Timothy Geithner. Thank you for calling, sir. The only point I would make is the fact that the Israeli Mossad said it at the time. Saddam Hussein had those weapons of mass destruction. They said he took them in trucks across the border into Syria, hid them in Syria. And we've now found that Assad used weapons of mass destruction on his own people in Syria, so that's borne out. George Bush didn't make the case very well, but Saddam did have those weapons. His nuclear guy defected to the United States, testified before Congress, and said he left because Saddam was trying to build big nuclear weapons. He didn't like it. John, you're on with Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner. Good morning to you at Boston's talk station, WRKO.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Yes, sir. I'm great.
Hey, listen, I heard something else from the Timothy Geithner this morning on the news where a spokesman came out for him and said that what he said in the book wasn't true.
I heard that.
Can you believe that? I mean, it's like, just another lie on top of another lie.
Well, but it happened to Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush said he didn't want citizenship for illegal aliens in his book. 2 weeks later, he came out and said, yes, I do. So, but as far as Geithner goes, you can take the book for what it's worth at face value.
Because that was written before the whole Benghazi email came out. So,
well, what do you think happened here? John, what do you think happened here? Don't you think when this came out publicly this morning, Geithner got a call from somebody at the White House and said, Timothy, back off on this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's definitely the reason.
Should John Boehner trust Barack Obama to carry out immigration laws?
Absolutely not. But, John Boehner's a lousy speaker, so what do you expect?
Well, Boehner he caves in, but I appreciate the call, sir, and I thank you very much. Good to have you on the air. All right, let me ask you the question. Now that Geithner has come out and said, and anybody out there who's a Democrat, who's a left-winger, I mean, it's the guy's own Secretary of the Treasury who says they asked me to lie to the American people that Social Security was not affecting the deficit. And they asked me to be outraged on camera about the bankers when I wasn't outraged, but I was supposed to play this role. Does anybody out there still want to trust, no matter what your politics, Barack Obama? If you were John Boehner, would you trust him on immigration? Would you trust him on anything? 617-266-6868 is the number to Boston. Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner, who's off today. Good to have you with us. It is 7:20 at Boston's talk station, WRKO. All right, folks, good morning to you. 7:23 it is. Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner at Boston's talk station, WRKO. Nice to have you with us as we move right along. By the way, in case you're interested, remember the movie Scarface? Remember that mansion that Al Pacino, playing Tony Montana, lived in at the end, that massive scene of shootout? Well, that mansion in which this film was shot is now for sale at $35 million, if you're interested. More to the real world, we're talking about this latest breaking story this morning from Timothy Geithner, the former Secretary of the Treasury. He says that Barack Obama's administration asked him to lie and say publicly that Social Security was not affecting the deficit. And he also said they wanted him to pretend to be outraged on camera at the bankers because of the economic collapse, and he didn't feel he could do that because he's not a guy who expresses outrage in that way. It wound up that Obama did that himself. The latest twist and turn in an administration that has been pummeled by its unethical, immoral, and disgraceful behavior toward the American people, showing disregard for the American people by just blatantly not even pretending to be genuine, just lying. Steve, you're on with Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner at Boston's talk station, WRKO. Good morning.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
I'm good, sir.
That's good. Hey, Mike, all these little, not little, but the lies that are coming out It's, I mean, you can only contain him for so long, this type of lie, but I hear a lot of people say that he's unqualified, he's stupid, whatever the case may be. Obama is not a stupid man. He has an agenda, and it's going as planned. Now, the old saying goes, know your enemy. He is the number one enemy of the United States. And he sympathizes with the enemy. And the only way I think, I mean, I say start impeachment now, even though it's not going anywhere, it would send a message. But I think that the only thing that's going to wake the American people up, because today's Democrats is tomorrow's communists, there's going to be another 9/11, and people are going to die, and people are going to get outraged, and that's the only thing I think that will wake this country up. And then if it doesn't, then unfortunately, I hate to say it, but we're done.
You know, by the way, check and see if any of the so-called left-wing media, New York Times, Washington Post, NBC, ABC, CBS, MSNBC, see whether they cover the story about Timothy Geithner's new book and the revelations in it.
Yeah, they won't. You know, this is history repeating itself. You know, Stalin and all that. I mean, it's a scary time for it's a scary time for Jews, Christians, any peaceful religion, because as we all know, our enemy is the Muslims, and they are not a peaceful religion. They are vicious, they're brutal, and if that's the kind of God they pray to, then they'll have their answer when their day comes.
Well, it's not all of them, but certainly the fundamentalists, the jihadists.
Well, yeah, but you know, those fundamentalists, though, if they don't stand up and denounce it, then they're just as guilty as the radicals. And it's about time they stand up and denounce it. Because I understand what people say, the moderates. You know what? They're just as guilty by standing there silent.
I agree with you. I remember when the Jewish Defense League was out there with its radical rhetoric about blowing up mosques and all of that. And as a member of the Jewish faith myself, I condemned it. It was wrong. I didn't want anybody carrying out violence in the name of religion, much less my own. And so I condemned them. I used to debate the head of the Jewish Defense League on the air. It was unconscionable. Yeah. And the same thing here. Why are, you're right, why are Muslim people who are decent, law-abiding citizens sitting back and letting this happen? Why don't they stand up and be counted?
That's true. You know, Mike, I mean, being the same, I'm also of the Jewish faith, and I myself, you know, I'm at the age where, you know, whatever happens to me in the future, you know, I've lived a good life. I'm not. It doesn't bother me what's going to happen. But I have, a family, kids, and you know what? It's their future, and it's not looking good the way it's currently going.
I appreciate it, Stephen. I thank you for calling, and it's an interesting point about the silence of the so-called silent majority in the Islamic faith. Where are they standing up? Do you see them condemning the barbaric actions of the fundamentalists who go out and commit horrifying, violent crimes of murder and terrorism against innocent people? You don't see it happening. If you want to respond to this point about Geithner now exposing further attempts to deceive you, the American people, through this administration in his book, and then, of course, as he said, this fellow, Geithner then all of a sudden backed off and said, well, they didn't really do that. He said it this morning after the text of the book came out. All of a sudden, he gets pressured by the White House to back off on that point. It is unbelievable. Absolutely incredible. When we come back, I'm going to get into a whole issue about immigration and deception again by this administration. You remember when Barack Obama said that we were going to go after, and Janet Napolitano, when she headed Homeland Security, we're going to go after those people who are the criminals. Not just who got here illegally, even though they are criminals, and they violated federal law, but they said we're going to go after people who committed other crimes and focus on them. Well, guess what? We find out now there has been a release of many of those people who have committed violent crimes by this administration under ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. They put them back on the streets. We'll talk about that next. Our number to Boston, if you want to respond to all of this, do you trust Obama? Should John Boehner trust Obama on immigration? 617-266-6868. Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner. Good to have you with us at Boston's talk station, WRKO. It is 7:30. And welcome back in, folks. Good to have you with us as we get back to the conversation I mentioned before the break here on the Jeff Kuhner Show. Mike Siegel in for Jeff today at Boston's talk station, WRKO. We have another undermining of American society. Look, you'll remember that in the 90s, advisors, and when I've been here before, I've made this point, economic advisors to this president had written about the fact that they believed that the United States had to be reduced in our economic well-being by about 10 to 15% in order to spread the wealth. In other words, redistribution of wealth was promulgated by individuals who later became now advisors to this president. If we reduced our wealth and spread it around the world, it might reduce the likelihood of war because other countries would have a greater economic condition. But we'd have to suffer the consequence of living in a lesser economic standard. And isn't that beginning to happen in this country as the middle class is pounded and pummeled and is basically living on the edge? You know, if you look at the studies that have been done recently, there's something in the neighborhood of 40% of the American people who say that they can only live for 4 months if they lose their job on the monies they have. And something like 25% could live only for 1 month on the monies they have if they lost their job. We're living in a marginal economy for large numbers of people. And so the administration wants to reduce the quality of life in America to increase it elsewhere. One of the ways they're doing that, at least that the impact is going to be there, is in the immigration area. Now, you'll remember the administration under Janet Napolitano at Homeland Security and now Jay Johnson, they talk about the fact that they want to only go after those who are hardened criminals who've committed crimes other than entering the country illegally. I'm not sure why they want to do that. Frankly, entering the country illegally is a crime in and of itself, but they want to put that aside and only go after the others. All right, all well and good. It turns out that the Center for Immigration Studies has looked at what we've been doing. And we've had 36,000 immigrants who were released last year from Immigration and Customs Enforcement. It turns out that many of them are criminals, hardened criminals, put back in the streets of America. There were 36,007, to be exact, criminal aliens who had more than 87,000 convictions among them. 36,000 people, 87,000 convictions. That's almost 2.5 convictions per illegal alien released last year. What were those convictions? 15,635 for drunken driving, 9,187 for people labeled as dangerous drug convictions, 2,691 for assault, 1,724 for weapons offenses, 303,000 for flight escape. Now, if there's 303 people who are going to be guilty of flight escape or likely to do that, you would think they would be bad candidates for release, yet they were released anyway. So all these people are back out on the streets of America, thanks to this administration who said, oh, we're going to take care of the criminal types who commit hardened crimes. And they put them back out there by the thousands. Another reason why Boehner should walk away from Barack Obama and any immigration reform. Why would you do it if the guy is putting hardened criminals back on the streets now? Mike, you're on with Mike Siegel. Good name you have there at Boston's talk station, WRKO, in for Jeff Kuhner. Hello, Mike.
Good morning, Mike. Always a pleasure to hear you in the morning replacing Jeff. Mike, I just want to say that. First of all, I want to say about Geithner, a guy that I labeled kind of a wimp. I've changed my mind completely on him. I think he's a man of courage. He said that he can't lie. He's going to write a book. He's going to express his discouragement with this president. As far as the illegal immigration, Mike, as far as I am concerned, I think this is the number one issue in America today as far as the future of our country. That is, when I'm dead and buried and my grandkids are 20 or 25 years old, the country that they're going to have is going to be lawless. It's going to be a people of movement from one state to the next. It's going to be a very, very, very bad place to live, in my opinion, because of the negligence of their duty. The people like Cantor and the rest of them, I believe they should be indicted for not upholding their oath of office, because our country is going to be, as far as I'm concerned, is going to be not the country that we had as children or as adults, but a different world for our grandchildren. And they're going to look back and say, where were you people? Why didn't you stop this when you had the chance? That's all I have to say.
I appreciate it, and I thank you. And I got to tell you, folks, he makes a point about our grandchildren. Look, if you care about this country, maybe people have just given up. Maybe people have just had it. Maybe you don't want to even talk about it. But if there's any hope left for this country to come back to the strength that it was, if there's anything left in this country to bring it back to the standards that we had before Obama took office, then we've got to stand up and be counted. If you still want to fight for this country, why don't we start right here this morning? Get your thoughts on the air. You've got Geithner, the Secretary of the Treasury, saying that he was asked to lie for this administration. You have Bob Gates, Secretary of the Defense, saying that Obama and Hillary talked about the political consequences at Benghazi, not really caring about the security of those people. You have the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, in which this president has changed that law without congressional authorization over 20 times. Nobody seems to care that that's a violation of his constitutional authority. You have him trying to get net neutrality implemented, even though 2 federal appeals courts have unanimously said doesn't have the authority. He wants to get control to squash conservative websites, is basically what they want to do. I think you ought to be concerned. How about the IRS and the fact that conservative groups couldn't get the same not-for-profit status, exemption from profit status, as liberal groups under Lois Lerner, and her carrying the water for this administration? Isn't it interesting that she's been held in contempt of Congress, and yet Boehner says, I'm not going to arrest her? Well, what good is the contempt of Congress citation? They did it to Eric Holder, now they do it to Lois Lerner, and nobody gets any accountability. It's just meaningless labeling of these people without consequences. If you're in contempt of Congress, shouldn't Congress hold you to have consequences to that? Meaning that you're brought in perhaps by federal marshals to testify or to be arrested, housed by the Congress, which is legal to do. We in this country have to start thinking in terms of taking the country back. Or do you believe we aren't going to be able to do it? Now, I'd like to see the lines get completely filled up with people who still believe in the patriotic concept that this country is worth fighting for, that this country can be saved, and people need to stand up and need to force the Republicans to stand on the values that they're supposed to believe in, even when they stray from those values. I say that and ask you to call in and do that and express your patriotism, because it turns out that Gallup has done a survey of the American people. A majority of U.S. registered voters, specifically 53% of us, say they are less enthusiastic about voting than previous elections. While 53% are less enthusiastic about voting, 35% are more enthusiastic. That means there's an 18 percentage point enthusiasm deficit. I think that should be of concern to every single person listening to this program. Do you feel less enthusiastic about voting? Do you feel this country is worth saving? And by the way, 42% of Republicans and Republican-leaning independents say they're more enthusiastic than usual about voting. But while 42% are more enthusiastic, 50% of Republicans are less enthusiastic. Even Republicans have an 8-point enthusiasm deficit. Look, the bottom line is, if we don't stand up, it's part of our responsibility to participate in the system. It's part of our responsibility to stand up and say we cannot allow this country to be taken down in this way. Why should the minority be taking over for the majority? Most Americans believe in the values that you and I would talk about. Balanced budgets, limited government, free markets, constitutional compliance, presidents who follow the law and carry out the law and not decide arbitrarily what laws they'll carry out and what laws they'll follow. That's balderdash. There's a requirement to carry out the law in the executive branch, and they're not doing it in this administration. So let me see you fill up the lines at 617-266-6868 with people who care about this country and want to turn it around. You hear all of this going on all morning, and I realize you can say, well, let me throw up my hands. Well, you can't throw up your hands. What you do is make it more reinforcing to say, we've got to do something about this. He's lying and lying and lying and cheating the American people and stealing this country from its values and its principles. This has got to stop. We'll come back to your calls. Jeff Kuhner Show, Mike Siegel in for Jeff, 617-266-6868. Do you care? At Boston's talk station, WRKO. Okay, folks, 7:53, right to your calls. Lines are jammed, and we'll get right to them about this country saving it from the likes of Barack Obama. Leslie, first of all, you're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner. Good morning at WRKO.
Hi. Can you hear me?
I sure can.
Okay. What do you expect little people to do about this? I mean, the Congress does nothing. The politicians do nothing. The corporate thugs in Wall Street are all in cahoots with Obama. The drug companies are all in cahoots with the government. The unions are all in with them. And so are the insurance companies. We as small people, all we can really do is vote for the right people. That's about all we can do. I mean, I don't know what everyone expects us to do.
Well, first thing, let me just remind you, Leslie.
Bush sat there in office for 8 years.
Let me remind you something.
And he never closed the borders. So he is no better than Obama. Until they close the borders, there is nothing that's going to improve.
Leslie, let me suggest what you can do.
Okay.
All right? I'm going to give you the name of a person I happen to know. Her name is Amy Kramer. She was a Delta Airlines flight attendant. She was home one day, outraged at the way this government spends money, raising the national debt ceiling, having increased budget deficits, on and on and on. And so what she did was to get on Facebook and Twitter and express this. As she tells the story, more and more people started responding to her, adding their names one after the other. She then realized what was happening here. It was a finger out of the dike of people's outrage. She became the leader of the Tea Party Express. Many people have been elected to office as a result of various Tea Party groups getting involved. I appreciate the call, Leslie, but I don't want to sit here and wring my hands about what should the little people do. The fact is there are more little people than big people, and the little people can vote people out of office. Ed Markey was voted in by the people of Massachusetts outrageously. Elizabeth Warren was voted in outrageously. They're two left-wing wackos. Why would this... maybe the state should educate itself, get into the local communities where you live, small groups one at a time, and try to change that and elect people who make sense. Vicky, you're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO. Good morning.
Hey, Michael, thank you for taking my call. Listen, I absolutely believe that America will survive this. And I believe November will be the start of that. What I'm looking for are candidates who are as passionate as a conservative talk show host. And what I'd love to see is they go on the attack. It's always been my impression that we got great candidates, the liberals go for character assassination, and then we go on the defensive. There is so much low-hanging fruit for a great candidate. There's no reason to go on the defensive. Just attack what's going on. I think people are very frustrated and angry as never before, and I think there's a great opportunity in November to begin the turnaround.
I agree with you. And I think if people really, beginning now at the grassroots level, get together in groups and work for candidates who are the kind you're describing, it can work. And it can change. Look, the fact is, Mitt Romney was elected in this state as governor. Say what you will, he's certainly more conservative than Deval Patrick. And earlier on, Frank Sargent, William Weld, economic conservatives have been elected to this state. So it can be done. I appreciate it, Vicki, and I thank you very much. Kathy, you're next with Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at WRKO. Good morning.
Good morning, Mike. My thoughts were just like your last caller, Vicki. I think that we absolutely can get this country back. This country is awesome. It's definitely worth fighting for, and I agree with her, and I was going to say the same thing. The Republican Party or the Tea Party, whoever goes against these, left-wing Democrats who really are dirty, they're just, if people can just pay attention, that they always get themselves out of the corner, like what's going on at the White House, right? They can just never tell the truth.
And it's been proven again with this Geithner expose. I mean, the evidence is out there. I thank you very much, Kathy.
It's embarrassing. Thank you.
Thank you. It is embarrassing to the country. Paul is next. You're on with Mike Siegel for Jeff at WRKO. Good morning.
Good morning, Mike. These polls, I think, are a little bit, they use wording that's a little bit off the point. Because I'll tell you, as a conservative, I'm not excited about voting. I'm resolved. I will vote, and I will vote till they take it from that right from me. But, I got to say, I'm not excited about it because I see too frequently, I'm not 20 anymore. I mean, we've been in this dance for a while, and I've been watching dead people vote for too many years. We've been watching illegals vote for too many years to be excited about the purity of this event we call voting. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't vote. We need to get out there, and we need to have a backbone, and we need to stand strong, and we need to face the tide. But the word excitement, I find it hard to be excited about entering into this kind of an arena where we know the enemy doesn't play. They play dirty all day. Our side has been playing the rope-a-dope, but they forgot. At the end of the fight, Ali came out swinging. He didn't just stay there and take a beating the whole fight. He took a beating for the first 10 rounds, and then he came out and he broke a guy's face. That's what we need to do, is we need to stand up, and it's time to start swinging back.
Well, the point I would make to you is Boehner has it in his hands. And yet he's still talking about, well, the president needs to show us trust. Well, don't you think it's time for Boehner to say...
on our side.
Well, let me just make this point.
More than Obama is.
Don't you think Boehner needs to say, we do not, just say point blank, we do not trust this president, and while he's in office, I'm not doing immigration reform, period. Case closed. That's what Boehner should be saying, instead of playing Mickey Mouse with Barack Obama, who's shown over and over again he can't be trusted, and I thank you for calling, Paul. It's about time Boehner stood up and said, it's over. Immigration reform ain't happening, folks, because we can't trust this president to carry out any laws we pass. What do you make of that? Should he be doing that? Stand up and be counted. Let me get your call. 617-266-6868. Jeff Kuhner Show, Mike Siegel in at WRKO.
News at the top and bottom. Talk in between.
Yes, it is. Thank me very much. Go right ahead, my friend.
This is AM 680 WRKO, Boston.